Here we are back with another topic, rather than this is a new chapter. And this new chapter, this is entitled as a biological molecule, and your elaboration of this topic has to be very much clear because if you remain confused with the biological molecule, you are not able to crack the nutrition in human, the nutrition in plant, and the rest of the chapters, they would make a mess for you. So before I proceed, you must get an idea that what these biological molecules are. So this word molecule that I have with me, so this is frequently used in chemistry. At some point, you may have seen the periodic table, and in the periodic table, we have got the elements like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and the nitrogen, and the stuff like that. So if I would take the atoms, and these atoms, when I would group them together or when I would combine them together, so as a result of that, we would end up making the molecules. So when we use the word biological molecules, so our meaning is the same, that there are some atoms, and these atoms, when they would combine and join with one another, so they would make the molecules, and these molecules are since being formed within the bodies of the living organisms, or we obtain them from the other organisms. So this is why we add the word along with the molecule, and the word becomes the biological molecule. So by simple mean, like these biological molecules, they are made up of the group of atoms, and since they exist within the living organisms, or we obtain them from other living organisms by simply eating them. So that is why the word becomes a biological molecule. Now, how this is related to the formation of the living organism, because earlier I have taught you about the organization of the human body, that we will have the cells, and these cells, when they would combine with one another, they would make the tissues they would make the organs, these organs when combined would be making the organ system, and at then we would may end up making a complex organism out of it. Now the slight situation is that you would never be able to be making these cells until or unless you have got these atoms. So these atoms, when they combine with one another, so they make the sugars, they make the proteins, they make the fats, and these molecules, they make the organelles, and then afterward, the organization of the living organism, it comes to the existence. So now the situation is that how many type of the biological molecules we have got with us. So by name, what we have with us, so they are the sugars. For simple words, we technically refer to them as the carbohydrates. Then we have the proteins, and then the third one, they are the fats. And at the end, we have to be looking on toward the last and the one of the most important biological molecule. And this is what we term this as the nucleic acids. But before we start looking at how come each of the biological molecule is formed within the living organisms, there are some of the technical terms that you people need to have an idea of. So the first term that I have written for you guys, so this is the polymer. And the other word that I have got, so this is monomer with us. Now, if I were to give you an example from the daily life, so the room in which you would be sitting, so it would have the walls. So just feel like that this wall is a complex structure, and this complex structure, in term of the monomer or the polymer thing, I would be naming this as the polymer, we say. And if this wall was to be concerned, so in this wall we have got these small repeating units that I'm making for you. So all of these small units that would make up this wall. So here we have got with us is what is the brick. So this brick in term of the technicality. So this is the monomer with us, as brick and brick combine with one another to be making the wall. So likewise, when we will have the monomers, and these monomers, if we keep on linking them over and over again, so we would end up making a large molecule, and that large molecule is polymer with us. So by simple mean, what polymer is, that this polymer would be a large molecule, and this large molecule would be made up of the small repeating units, and these small repeating units, they are termed as the monomers. And if I were to tell you about the monomers, so this monomer would be a small unit, and when these small units, when they link up with one another, so as a result of that, we make a complex substance out of it, and that would be named as the polymer. Okay, so you see here I have the monomer, here I have the monomer and the monomer, and in between the monomers we would have some attractive forces, and as a result of that we would end up making the polymer. Moving onward, we have got this another two of the terms that we are supposed to be having an idea of, and the first word is hydrolysis. And when the word hydrolysis is concerned, so the word that clicks in our mind is that from the hydro, there should be the water availability. So you see that if I have got something with me and this is a complex substance, and if into this complex substance, if I were to be adding water into it, and by that if I were to be converting them into some small molecules, or if I were to break it down into some small units, so this would be hydrolysis. And whenever the condensation word has to be considered, so this is the opposite of hydrolysis. Like if I have got these small molecules, and if these small molecules, if they are linked with one another, and we make some complex thing out of it by the removal of water, so this would be condensation. So you must know the definition of these terms. So by the hydrolysis, we have to break down the large molecules, okay? And these large molecules, when they would be converted or when they would be broken down into the small molecules in the presence of water, so this is hydrolysis. And if I were to break down or if I were to convert the small molecules into a complex molecules, and that too by the removal of the water, so this would be the condensation. Now let us just try to look on toward the first biological molecule that we have got with us. So they are entitled as a sugar, or technically we call them as a carbohydrates. Now we must know that what elements make them. Since they are the biological molecules, so what elements make them? They include the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, and usually for your level, what we consider is that these carbohydrates that we have, so they are the big molecules and they are made up of the small repeating units, and these small repeating units, they are glucose with us. Other than that, we have to look on toward the classification that we have got for these sugars. There are a lot of the criteria on which the classification of the sugars can be done. But here we would see that on the basis of the carbon atom that we have got within these carbohydrates or within these sugars, so they are fundamentally categorized into three things. One we have with us are the monosaccharides, then we have the word disaccharide, and lastly, what we have got with us, so they are termed as the polysaccharides, we say. So from the name, we have to assess as that what sugar we are talking about. When we say the word mono, so the word mono means single, and when we say the word saccharide, so this means sugar, so they are the simple sugars. And if I were to say disaccharides, so di mean double and the saccharide means sugar. So whenever the double sugars are referred to as in biology, so they would be the disaccharides. And lastly, we have got these complex sugars, and the complex sugars, they are named as polysaccharide. By the word poly, what we mean are multiple, and by the word saccharide that we have got over here, so sugar. So when we have got many of the sugars linked together, so we would end up making the complex sugars. And here I am to show you that how we would go from the monosaccharide to the polysaccharide. So you know that here I am making a complex thing. Here I have got the simple thing. And when I would move from the simple to be making the complex, so at every step I have to be removing the water out of them, or I had to be condensing them together. So the usual protocol is that we will have the monosaccharides. These monosaccharide, when till they would be linked with one another, so we would end up making disaccharides. And when these disaccharides they would be combined with one another, then we would make the complex sugars out of it. And these complex sugars they are termed as polysaccharides. So this was an overall generalized scheme of the classification that we have to understand in case of the carbohydrate. Now let us proceed further and be discussing about the first, you could say, class of the carbohydrates that we have with us. So they are entitled as monosaccharides, simple sugars, single sugars. The element in them is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the other name of this is this, as I've said earlier, that they are the simple sugars. Now we must know that what properties we have got for these monosaccharides. So these properties are that whenever you would try to be putting them into the water, so they would become soluble. And whenever you would be tasting them, so they would appear sweet in taste. If I were to give you the name of the multiple monosaccharide that you have to be remembering as that we have got this glucose, then we have this galactose, and then lastly we have got this fructose. So all of these three, they are the simple sugars or they are the monosaccharides. Now, if I were to tell you that how come different atoms they combine with one another to be making this glucose, galactose, and fructose. So we have to be bothering about their molecular formula. And as per their molecular formula is concerned, so if I combine 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen, So that would make all of these three, the glucose, the galactose, and the fructose. So the question here arises as that if they have the different names, so they should have a different formula, but they have the same formula. So from here you need to get an idea is that usually when we have the same number of the atoms, but their arrangement of the atom is different, so we use a word for them and that word becomes isomers. So no matter glucose, galactose, or fructose is concerned, all of them they would have the same formula. But since the arrangement of the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen would be different in all of these three, so that is why they are given the different name. So the answer is written here that they have got the different name despite having the same formula because in them the arrangement of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen is different. If I were to go to an example, so you see that if we say something as an isomer, so what we mean is that their formula would be same, but their arrangement of the atom is different. Now you see that I have got these two compounds for you. So this is a four carbon containing compound, and you would learn about them in chemistry. Now you see I have got one carbon, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, and total of the hydrogen that I have with me, so they are total of 10 hydrogen I have got. Now, if I were to change the arrangement of these carbons, so here you see I have made three carbon in the straighter chain and the fourth carbon has come above. And now we have changed the arrangement or we have changed the configuration of these atoms. So such molecules that have the same molecular formula but different structural arrangements, so they would be entitled as isomers. So these simple sugars, they are the isomers of one another. Now, the other thing we must crack here is that where they would actually be lying. So the glucose monosaccharide, it would be present in small amount in all the living organisms. If I were to talk about the fructose, so it would only be available within the plants, but the animals can consume it. And if I were to talk about the galactose, so it would be available within the milk. So this is what we are done for the monosaccharide.